Hi, I'm Lazarina Stoy, and this is SEO in 2023.
Lazarina, what's your number one SEO tip for 2023?
So my tip is to start utilizing Google Cloud's publicly available APIs to help you execute SEO. And just to expand a little bit more on that, I think that Google Cloud, and not only Google Cloud, but also other giants like AWS and Microsoft, they have a bunch of APIs that can be used by us SEOs as part of our role. So using the Google Cloud's ecosystem, just to name a few, the natural language API is one, the speech-to-text API is another one that we can use. Vision API has been quite popular, just another one that we can utilize for captioning images. Google Cloud Translation can be very useful when you're working with large-scale internationalization projects. Knowledge Graph API is quite an interesting one that we should be incorporating into what we do. And I think all of these can provide us just an additional layer to the work that we are doing and to the analysis that we are conducting that will help us understand our work a little bit better.
So there are many APIs that Google are now giving us access to. If SEOs want to go to cloud.google.com/APIs, they can see probably tens of different APIs. Why are Google giving us access to these APIs?
Well, it's they're making money out of it. They're not 100% free. So it's a massive business. So I think that's the first reason, right? Like profit. But also, I think from my personal point of view, I wouldn't know the reason why, but I definitely feel like it makes if you know how to utilize them in different tasks, it makes your life a lot easier. And from my personal understanding, it would be interesting to know also how these APIs are used into some of their other products. So obviously we know that these APIs have not been developed with the sole purpose of being released. So perhaps they have been developed as part of another product. So it's really interesting to think about, obviously, like the Google Translate API has been released, but originally it was used as part of Google Translate. The entity recognition knowledge graph, we know that these are being used in search. The Vision API is being used in image search as well, and a bunch of other products that Google has. So it's very interesting to see how your content or maybe your website looks from the point of view of these systems that Google is using, and just to kind of understand that a little bit better, if you wish, how they see your website if they are using these APIs in the same form that they are being released.
So we talked about this briefly before we started recording, and I asked you who should be using these APIs, and you said under your breath, everyone. So is it really the case that every SEO really needs to be aware of this and understand how these APIs are actually working?
Yeah, I mean, everyone is a very optimistic scenario, right? The reason why I'm an advocate of everyone experimenting with them is because I think they give an additional layer of understanding of what is happening. And I think it's a very good perspective of seeing potentially how your website looks from the point of view of, a model, a system. So that's why I think it's good to have that. Also, because they are APIs developed by a massive organization with a very big budget by literally the best researchers in the world, they are very advanced for what you get out of the box as a working model. And from that point of view, it's very easy to create custom reports based on a certain use case that you have in SEO. So for instance, if we talk about entity identification, there are a bunch of different use cases where we can use this type of task. And typically it will be very hard to understand or do entity recognition yourself if you're just starting to code that algorithm or starting to use an API out of the box. So it's easier to start with something that has been developed by a corporation like Google or Amazon, because they provide you with the code to start doing that. They provide you with different use cases for a different platform. Let's say if you want to do it in Python or in AppScript, in Google Sheets, you name it. And for that, we can apply it to different things, like, for instance, internal link work, identifying anchor text opportunities. We can apply it to SERP analysis. We can apply it to content analysis that we are doing. And this is just one example of many. So I think everyone should start thinking about it.
So it would be great to dive into a specific API if possible, and just get an example of the activity, the task that you were talking about there. So I get you were talking about identifying anchor text and links to begin with. So which API would you use to do that?
Yeah, so the Google Cloud Natural Language API is an API that allows for you to identify entities and to also do sentiment analysis and to do text annotations. So this is a very useful API if you are doing content analysis, SERP analysis, internal link opportunity identification, anchor text identification. Obviously, only on its own, it can only identify entities, but we as SEOs, we collect a very large number of data and we compare the report or the extract of this API and pair that with crawl data. We compare that with search volume data, and we can build a very interesting picture about, correlations between different data points. And from that, we can, I think, come up with a lot more interesting scenarios about what we are doing in our day-to-day.
Why do SEOs need to be using these APIs directly? Is it not the case that maybe there are loads of different SEO tools out there, SEO platforms out there? Will they not be using Google APIs in their platform and will not be sufficient to actually use these platforms?
Oh, that's a good question. I hope that at some point they start incorporating some of these APIs. Obviously, I think cost is one barrier to having this implemented. And also another barrier that I think about, but obviously I'm not in that sphere and I'm not sure whether this is an actual barrier or not, is just being able to push this to production to a live system or a tool that you have. I believe that might be a little bit more complex. It might take more time, obviously. Deployments, even at Google, like there was recently a talk at Brighton SEO by Daniel Weisberg, and he walked us through the process of releasing an API at Google. Was about a year, and that's with an API that was already available in Google. So I think the time barrier is a big one as well. It's a lot slower to wait for a tool to integrate that API. And for that, I think it's important to understand that you can start using these APIs without even having any coding experience, because there is Google Sheets templates available for almost all of them. And you can just quickly incorporate a very advanced level of understanding and analysis to your reports and your day-to-day work.
Another Google API I see available is speech to text. So why would someone choose to want to use that? Because there are many tools out there that offer speech to text. Would Google offer a higher quality, cheaper if you're doing it in high volume, or are there other benefits to using Google's API for that?
Yeah, absolutely. So Google's API, from my personal testing for speech to text, has been a lot more precise in recognizing speech. And also they do something else as well, which is typically in a speech to text problem. Let's say, for instance, you have a YouTube video, but not just one, let's say 500 YouTube videos, and you're working as an SEO. So there's a good opportunity to, if that content only exists in a video form, to have that published also in a textual form on your website. So having a transcript for that is a very easy way to kind of repurpose that content as well, or to convert it to a blog post, depending on the type of content it is. So having a speech to text problem is very common in that case, but having an API that actually understands sentences, that understands very complex concepts being mentioned in those videos is very rare. And also, even further in terms of how rare something is into this realm of problems, is having proper punctuation into the sentences that are being transcribed live. So if you are, for instance, if you have this problem and you're working with a client like that, it's obviously important to find an API that does all of these things, understands text, understands complex entities, and understands punctuation and how to use that to the best of the ability of the API. And Google's speech-to-text API is quite good at solving all three problems.
I mean, it certainly sounds something that's relevant and useful for enterprise websites with millions of pages, or SEOs trying to perhaps produce transcripts for thousands of videos at the same time. Is it not the case that perhaps for smaller websites, SEOs operating with a smaller number of videos or different tasks that they have to do, it's probably not so appropriate for them?
Well, I would argue, because especially if you have a smaller website, you have a very limited budget probably as well. And so the budget that you would have to commission a person to transcribe videos would be quite big in comparison to having an automated API do that for you with a click of a button. So I think that's a common misconception, that, using advanced and technical APIs, machine learning, is something that should only be done for large scale enterprise organizations, but actually it is even more useful for people that don't have the budget. Because imagine if you have like maybe even just 30 videos or 5 videos, and that is costing you the budget of maybe a campaign that you can do with PPC, or maybe even publishing 5 new content pieces, because you have taken this budget and given it to someone transcribing videos. So I think it's all about removing the barriers of how difficult that is perceived as by people. So from that point of view, just removing the barrier of, how difficult people think machine learning working with APIs is. And once you know that everything can be executed quite fairly easily, then it can replace a very large chunk of someone's budget, even if they're in a smaller organization.
If someone hasn't worked with APIs before, is there a lot of technical knowledge required in order to actually start using this? And is there also perhaps something like plugins available for popular CMSs in order to get things up and running quickly?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I actually give a lot of props to Google Cloud in terms of the documentation that they provide for all of their APIs. They not only provide documentation on how to get started, but they also provide documentation in different languages. And obviously, as we know, one of the languages is AppScript. So AppScript is the language that allows you to build custom functions in Google Sheets. And obviously, a function in Google Sheets, once it's built once, the only thing that you need to replace is just your API key. And I think that, to answer your question, I don't know which CMSs use this in order to make it readily available, but Google themselves have made it readily available to use most of these APIs, because you just have to copy paste the code from AppScript that is on their website, provide your API key after you have registered, and then you're good to go using this in the data that you already have in Google Sheets. So there's not really anything further to that you need to do. So it's literally as simple as 1 or 2 different steps that you need to take.
Well, you've shared what SEO should be doing in 2023, so now let's talk about what SEO shouldn't be doing. So what's something that's seductive in terms of time, but ultimately counterproductive? What's something that SEOs shouldn't be doing in 2023?
I think keyword stuffing and optimizing content based on a singular keyword. I think that's something that SEOs should stop doing in 2023. I think we have moved very much past keyword-based optimizations in terms of content, and also in terms of how we should be tracking the performance of the content that we write. And I think optimizing based on a singular keyword is not really the way to go moving forward.
The challenge, obviously, is that traditional SEO means that there's only so many characters within a title, only so many characters within a heading tag. So is it not okay to have a core target keyword on a page, but then write naturally around that particular topic with a view to ranking for as many related keywords as possible?
Yeah, I think the understanding more so towards like what the topic includes, even if it doesn't include the keyword that you're writing for. I think that what I'm trying to say is a lot of SEOs still get really hung up on the concept of keywords, where instead we are not really incorporating into the strategy that we're doing or the keyword research the concept of topics, subtopics, and what are the different keywords and entities that make a topic come to life, if you wish. And that not only includes a main keyword or a related keyword, or it also includes the questions that people ask. So essentially all of the different things that make a certain website or site section or whatever it is an authority on a topic. And this can go both ways. This can be something that is used to identify an opportunity in a marketplace, but it can also be used to identify maybe a place where maybe you shouldn't create content on this topic, right? So it can act as a both a positive and a negative thing for you to know this. So I think it's important to start doing that type of research as opposed to just collecting keywords and optimizing based on a singular keyword.
Lazarina Stoy is Senior SEO and Data Science Manager at Intrepid Digital, and you can find her over at lazarinastoy.com. Lazarina, thanks so much for being part of SEO in 2023.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Get your copy of SEO in 2023, the book, over at SEOin2023.com.